Love and Fallacies by Coley Hawkins. Table of Contents. Chapter 1, The Parquet Debate. Chapter 2, The Breaking Point. Chapter 3, The Baconator Betrayal. Chapter 4, The Jolly Green Giant. Chapter 5, The Crying Man. Chapter 6, My Buddy. Chapter 7, Eros. Chapter 8, The Incident on Napoki's Livestream. Chapter 9, The Creation of Diamond Ku Filan. Chapter 10, The Illusion of Truth. Conclusion, The Outsider's Perspective. Introduction. We navigate life through conversations, relationships, and experiences that often leave us wondering why people behave the way they do. Some discussions feel productive, while others spiral into chaos, leaving us frustrated, confused, and emotionally drained. Love and Fallacies is a deep dive into these interactions, analyzing the reasoning, the emotions, and the missteps that turn everyday conversations into unnecessary battles. Through personal experiences, online interactions, and real-life relationships, this book unpacks the logical fallacies and biases that shape our thinking and ultimately our connections with others. This is not just a book about debate or logic. It's about self-awareness, boundaries, and the lessons we learn through our mistakes. It's about recognizing when a conversation is productive and when it's time to walk away. Through humor, reflection, and a touch of reality TV-style narration, Love and Fallacies invites you to question not just others' logic, but your own. Welcome to the journey. Chapter 1, The Parquet Debate. It was mid-afternoon, and the sun cast a soft glow through the car windows as Kayla drove to the movie theater. She was looking forward to unwinding with a solo outing, excited to catch a film she'd been anticipating. Her long-distance boyfriend, Marcus, was not physically present, but he called to check in as she was en route. The conversation started off light, filled with idle chatter, until Kayla mentioned something from her day. "I was playing this game earlier, trying out this parquet move," she began animatedly, her hands briefly mimicking the motion before returning to the steering wheel. "Wait, what did you just say?" Marcus interrupted, his voice tinged with skepticism. "Parquet," Kayla repeated, glancing at her hands on the wheel. "What is parquet?" Marcus asked, his tone sharper now. Kayla hesitated, sensing the tension building. "You know, that sport where you jump over obstacles like rooftops and stuff?" Marcus's laugh was dismissive. "You mean parkour?" "Right, parkour," she replied, keeping her tone steady while thinking to herself, "Wait, where did I get that from?" Then she realized and said aloud, "Must have been a spoof video." But Marcus wasn't satisfied with her explanation. "It's called parkour," he emphasized, his voice firm as he began Googling the term to read aloud the definition. "And by the way, parquet is butter." Kayla felt a flicker of frustration. "I know what it is. I just misspoke. Why are you making such a big deal about it?" Marcus sighed, his tone turning more exasperated. "If you're going to interrupt me while I'm telling you what it is, you can just keep saying it that way." Kayla felt her frustration deepen. "I'm not interrupting you. I already explained why I said it that way." The conversation spiraled. To Kayla, it felt like Marcus always assumed the worst, turning her simple mistake into a grand argument. It was as though he was more interested in being right than understanding her. She couldn't shake the frustration of feeling like every interaction became a debate where she was on trial. Logical fallacies in the parquet debate. 1. Strawman fallacy. Example, Marcus says, "Why are you defending saying it wrong?" Explanation, Kayla wasn't defending her mistake. She was explaining why she misspoke. Marcus misrepresented her explanation to make it seem like she was defending the error itself. 2. False cause, post hoc. Example, Marcus says, "Parquet is butter." Explanation, Marcus implies that Kayla's use of parquet is because of its association with butter, rather than acknowledging her stated reason, hearing it in a spoof video. This assumption creates a false link between the two. 3. Ad hominem implied. Example, Marcus's dismissive tone and reaction. Explanation, instead of addressing the actual conversation, Marcus subtly attacks Kayla's credibility and competence, implying that her mistake makes her unworthy of proper consideration. 4. Hasty generalization. Example, Marcus's comment, "You just keep saying it wrong." Explanation, Marcus assumes that Kayla consistently makes this mistake based on a single instance without evidence to support such a sweeping conclusion. 5. Appeal to authority. Implicit. Example: Marcus Googles the definition of parkour to prove his point. Explanation: while Googling isn't inherently fallacious, Marcus uses this as an unnecessary display of authority, even though Kayla already admitted to her error. 6. False dichotomy. Example: Marcus says, "If you're going to interrupt me while I'm telling you what it is, you can just keep saying it that way." Explanation: Marcus frames the situation as if Kayla must either interrupt or continue saying parquet, ignoring the possibility of her simply clarifying her earlier mistake. 7. Circular reasoning. Example: Marcus's insistence, "It's parkour, not parquet, and because it's parkour, you're wrong to call it parquet." Explanation: Marcus loops back to the same point without addressing the root of the issue, Kayla's reasoning for her slip-up. 8. Red herring. Example: Marcus brings up parquet as butter. Explanation: the statement derails the conversation, distracting from the actual issue with an irrelevant comparison. And just like that, Kayla's solo movie night was about to begin, but the debates? Well, they were far from over. Will she finally break free from the never-ending cycle of unnecessary arguments? Will Marcus learn the difference between a conversation and a courtroom cross-examination? Find out next time on Love and Fallacies, where the debates are endless, the logic is questionable, and the only thing for certain is somebody's about to Google something. Sidebar: parquet is margarine, not butter. Embarking on a journey often means confronting unforeseen challenges. This chapter reminds us that new beginnings can be both exciting and daunting, setting the stage for personal growth. Chapter 2: The Breaking Point. The distance between Kayla and Marcus had always been measured in miles, but now it was something more, something deeper, something unspoken. Their relationship had begun unraveling long before either of them admitted it, stretched thin by life's relentless demands. Kayla was dealing with family turmoil, and Marcus was preoccupied with his own struggles. Though they both carried separate burdens, what hurt the most was realizing that when she needed him the most, he wasn't there. The night everything changed, Kayla's world had been thrown into chaos. Her younger brother, the one closest to her in age, had attacked their family, leaving destruction in his wake. The situation escalated to the point that Kayla, desperate and terrified, barricaded herself in the garage while calling 911, but as if the universe itself was working against her, the operator kept saying they couldn't hear her. She was frantic. She didn't know what was happening inside the house, if her mother was okay, if her brother was still a danger. The helplessness swallowed her whole. In that moment, she did the only thing she could think of. She texted Marcus. 911, one simple message, a distress signal. The only time in their entire relationship that she had ever used those 3 numbers. And he didn't respond. Not until much later the next day. By then, the storm had passed, but Kayla was left wrecked in its aftermath. When Marcus finally replied, his words felt like a slap in the face. "I didn't think it was that serious." That was the moment something inside her broke. She couldn't comprehend it, couldn't wrap her mind around how the one person who claimed to love her, the one person she thought she could count on, could dismiss her like that. Even if he couldn't physically be there, even if there was nothing he could have done, how could he not at least have been a comfort, a presence, an ear? How could he not believe her? Kayla replayed the moment in her head over and over again. And as she did, something became painfully clear. The connection was gone. She couldn't even force herself to feel something anymore. The relationship was dead. Logical fallacies in the breaking point. 1. Minimization, downplaying the issue. Example: Marcus saying, "I didn't think it was that serious." Explanation: instead of acknowledging Kayla's distress, Marcus dismisses it as an overreaction, invalidating her experience rather than trying to understand it. 2. Gaslighting, implicit. Example: his delayed response and the way he brushed off her emergency. Explanation: by acting as if her fear wasn't justified, Marcus made Kayla question whether her reaction was reasonable, despite the fact that she had every right to be upset. 3. False equivalence. Example: Marcus assuming that because he didn't perceive it as an emergency, it wasn't one. Explanation: Just because something doesn't seem serious to one person doesn't mean it isn't critical to someone else. 4. Appeal to ignorance. Example, his lack of immediate response. Explanation, Marcus assumes that because he didn't witness the danger firsthand, it must not have been as bad as Kayla described. 5. Strawman fallacy. Example, Kayla, how could you think of me like this? Marcus, I never said you were lying. Explanation, instead of addressing the core issue, his lack of emotional support, Marcus twists Kayla's words to make it seem as if she's accusing him of calling her a liar, shifting the conversation away from his actions. 6. False dichotomy. Example, Marcus's response to Kayla's direct question, if I have to say yes or no, I'll choose no. Explanation, instead of giving an honest, thoughtful response, Marcus forces a black and white choice when the situation was more nuanced. 7. Hasty generalization. Example, Kayla's realization that Marcus had been judging her unfairly for years. Explanation, Marcus repeatedly assumed the worst about Kayla, rather than evaluating each situation individually. 8. Circular reasoning. Example, Marcus's justification for his lack of urgency. Explanation, he assumes that because he didn't initially think it was serious, that must mean Kayla was overreacting instead of reconsidering the validity of her fear. Kayla had spent too much time being the understanding one, the listener, the quiet observer, the one who let things slide. Not this time. This time she chose herself. This time she was done letting people take up space in her life when they didn't deserve it. This time Marcus was officially out of the picture. But if Kayla thought her days of frustrating, one-sided relationships were over, well, life had other plans. Because just when she closed one messy chapter, another one was already being written. And this time, the drama wasn't coming from a boyfriend. Cue the entrance of Nike. Will Kayla finally find the peace she's looking for? Or is she about to enter a whole new battlefield disguised as a friendship? Stay tuned for the next episode of Love and Fallacies. Family isn't always defined by blood, but by the connections we choose to nurture. Chapter 3, The Baconator Betrayal. Bigo Live was both a refuge and a battlefield for Kayla. It gave her an outlet to express herself creatively, to escape into discussions about art, life, and spirituality. But just like in her personal relationships, she found herself entangled with people who didn't truly listen, people who took up space in conversations without making space for her. Nike had started off as a friend, but their dynamic had begun to shift. What once felt like easy, engaging dialogue now felt like an endless loop where Nike dominated every conversation, steering everything back to herself, the spiritual conversation that ended it all. The tension between them had been brewing for a while, but their final fallout came when Kayla had one simple question, one that had been on her mind for some time. Kayla, always the seeker of knowledge, wanted to know if the Bible or the Quran had anything to say about people with visions, those who could see spirits, those who possessed spiritual gifts. She was looking for understanding, for discussion, for insight, but she never got the answer. Instead, Nike hijacked the conversation, turning it into a monologue about herself. She proclaimed herself to be a divine feminine with special powers, someone deeply connected to the spiritual realm. And then, as if putting on a performance, Nike pulled out crystals and candles, setting them in front of her like she was about to unveil some sacred knowledge. Let me tell you what these mean, she announced confidently. Then she started Googling. Kayla sat there blinking. Nike wasn't speaking from experience. She wasn't drawing from her own wisdom. She was literally reading from Google in real time, like Kayla couldn't do the same thing. And that's when it hit her. Why did everyone feel the need to act like her teacher? Like she was some blank slate waiting to be educated, especially by people who were just Googling things on the spot. Kayla wasn't new to spirituality. Being from California, she had grown up around various spiritual practices, Santa Muerte, Yoruba traditions, ancestral work. She wasn't clueless. There were just certain things she wanted clarity on. And instead of actually engaging in that discussion, Nike had turned it into yet another episode of The Nike Show. As if this wasn't frustrating enough, Nike then segued into another long-winded story about herself. I connected with my mother in a dream, on purpose, she said, her tone almost theatrical, as if waiting for Kayla to react. Kayla sat there, feeling the frustration boil inside her. Not this again. This was supposed to be a conversation, a two-way discussion. Instead, it was yet another moment where Nike made everything about herself. Kayla had had enough. This is what happens in conversation with you a lot, she finally said, cutting through the tension. I try to talk about something and you always turn it into something else, about you. Nike's face shifted. She felt disrespected. In her mind, she was simply sharing a profound experience, unaware, or maybe unwilling, to acknowledge how she continuously drowned out Kayla's voice. For Kayla, this was the final straw. She didn't want one-sided relationships anymore. She was done with people who only wanted to hear themselves talk. After that conversation, they stopped speaking, but Nike wasn't done with Kayla just yet. The incident on Dr. Visa's stream. Days later, Kayla was on Dr. Visa's live stream, a respected content creator known for his discussions on nutrition and spirituality. It was supposed to be a normal night, another peaceful moment where Kayla could engage with people who actually had meaningful discussions. But then, Nike appeared in the comments. From the start, Kayla knew exactly what she was doing. Nike was trolling. Nike had entered the chat not to engage, but to disrupt, a clear sign that she was looking for attention since Kayla had cut her off. Oh, what are we doing today? Nike typed into the chat. Dr. Visa, who had little patience for nonsense, wasn't amused. Nike, you know I only go two places, the gym and the farmer's market. What do you want? Nike ignored his dismissiveness. Oh, what are we eating today? She asked, continuing to poke at him. Dr. Visa, knowing Nike's personality, decided to challenge her. You still eat meat, don't you? He asked. Instead of answering truthfully, Nike lied. I'm pescatarian, she claimed. Kayla couldn't hold it in. She had just witnessed Nike devour a Baconator and gas station hot sausages not even a week ago. Frustrated, but also amused by the sheer hypocrisy, Kayla called her out. You eat Baconators and hot sausages, Nike. Gas station hot sausages, to be exact. The chat exploded with laughter. But Nike? She was furious. And just like that, the situation turned ugly. Nike's response was instant, her tone sharp and defensive. She didn't even address what Kayla said. Instead, she went straight for a low blow. What about your court date and your crazy brother? Kayla's heart dropped. The chat fell silent. Nike had just violated an unspoken rule. It was one thing to argue, one thing to deflect, but another to expose someone's personal struggles in a public forum. And for what? Because Kayla called her out for lying about eating meat? Kayla sat there stunned. The betrayal wasn't just in the words themselves, but in what they revealed. Nike was never truly her friend. Because a real friend would never do something like that. At that moment, everything became clear. Marcus had dismissed Kayla's pain, acting as if it didn't exist. Nike had weaponized it, using it as a punchline for her own amusement. It wasn't just a problem with one person. This was a pattern. Kayla had spent too much time being the understanding one, the listener, the quiet observer, the one who let things slide. Not this time. Logical fallacies in the Baconator betrayal. 1. Red herring. Instead of responding to Kayla's comment about eating meat, Nike brought up Kayla's personal life. 2. Strawman fallacy. Nike twisted the situation into a personal attack instead of addressing the real issue. 3. Ad hominem. Nike's response had nothing to do with the conversation and was just a personal attack. 4. False cause, post hoc. Nike acted as if Kayla was attacking her, ignoring that Kayla had only pointed out the truth. 5. Appeal to emotion, manipulation. Nike always framed herself as the enlightened one, avoiding real discussion. 6. Gaslighting, implicit. Nike made Kayla feel like she was wrong for wanting an equal conversation. New faces, new lessons, and of course, new fallacies. Because in this world, the drama is never really over. Find out what happens next on Of Love and Fallacies. As relationships evolve, underlying tensions can surface, challenging our perceptions. Kayla's experiences underscore the necessity of addressing issues head on rather than allowing misunderstandings to fester, leading to potential conflicts. Chapter 4. The Jolly Green Giant. After the breakup with Marcus and the fallout with Nike, Kayla found herself searching for something new, something different, a space where she could exist without drama, where she could connect with people in a way that felt genuine. That's when she stumbled into Napoki's live. Napoki was a charismatic Sudanese woman whose streams drew in people from all walks of life. On any given day, you'd find a bishop, an atheist, someone who believed they were Jesus Christ, and people scattered across the country who had no particular stake in any debate. They were just there for the intellectual chaos. The night Kayla entered Napoki's live, the mood was light. Napoki was hosting karaoke night, a break from the usual debates, just good vibes and music. When it was Kayla's turn, she sang Bob Marley's Redemption Song. The chat lit up. Napoki loved it, her face beaming with excitement as she clapped and cheered. Sis, that was beautiful, she said. You've got a voice that makes people feel something. For the first time in a while, Kayla felt at home in an online space. Over the next few days, she kept coming back to Napoki's streams. The mix of personalities fascinated her: intellectuals, conspiracy theorists, spiritual seekers, and casual observers, all clashing and exchanging ideas. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. And then, on a different night, she met Apollo. Among the diverse mix of people, Apollo stood out. He had a presence, calm, sharp, observant. Napoki, sensing the energy between them, made the introduction. Kayla, meet Apollo. Apollo, this is Kayla. Apollo's voice came through, smooth and direct. I've got some things I want to teach later on my live, he said. Napoki didn't hesitate. Say less, she announced. Y'all, we're taking the party over to Apollo's live. Everybody, follow me. And just like that, Kayla followed Napoki and her audience over to Apollo's stream. She had no idea that this moment, this simple introduction, would change everything, because Apollo wasn't just another person on Bigo Live. He would become the catalyst for her biggest lessons yet. Apollo's live was different. It wasn't chaotic or full of performative arguments. There was order, structure. He wasn't just there to debate, he was there to teach. That night, Apollo was discussing logical fallacies, breaking them down in a way that was both digestible and profound. As he spoke, something in Kayla clicked. She had spent so much time navigating the drama with Marcus and Nike, struggling to make sense of their behaviors and her own reactions. And now, listening to Apollo explain concepts like straw man arguments and ad hominem attacks, she realized she had already been living in a world of logic. She just never had the words for it. The gaslighting, the misdirection, the manipulation, it all made sense now. Apollo was giving her the language to define what she had already felt in her bones. And for the first time, Kayla wasn't just experiencing things, she was understanding them. Apollo was different. He possessed a calm demeanor, sharp wit, and an uncanny ability to decipher complex human interactions. His expertise extended to various esoteric subjects, including astrology, dream interpretation, and the significance of zodiac signs, which he had studied extensively. He introduced Kayla to logical fallacies, errors in reasoning people often make unknowingly. For Kayla, this was a revelation, illuminating her understanding of past dynamics, including her relationship with Marcus and misunderstandings with friends. Suddenly, everything clicked. So, what you're saying is, Marcus was using a straw man argument? Kayla asked one day, disbelief in her voice. Exactly, Apollo replied. He wasn't addressing your actual point, your reasoning behind saying parquet. Instead, he attacked a distorted version of your argument, as if you were defending the mispronunciation itself. Kayla nodded slowly, feeling both validated and heartbroken. She began to see patterns, not just with Marcus, but throughout her life. She had spent years in conversations where logic was abandoned and emotions prevailed. For the first time, she realized she didn't have to accept this. But not everyone appreciated Apollo's insights, especially Sasha. During one of Kayla's own live streams, Apollo joined the panel alongside Sasha, one of Kayla's online family members. The conversation had already touched on Apollo's background, his knowledge of philosophy, dream interpretation, and various other intellectual disciplines. Sasha had been listening, intrigued, and she had even asked Apollo directly about his experience with dream symbolism. So when the moment came, she decided to share her own dream. In the dream, Sasha explained, giants with long green arms were reaching into my windows, trying to grab me, My boyfriend pushed me out of the way just in time. Apollo, analyzing the details, leaned into his response. Dreams of giants often represent overwhelming pressures or feelings of vulnerability, he began. The green color might symbolize your military background, connecting the giants to institutional expectations or personal challenges you face. But it could also represent insecurities, deep-rooted fears or uncertainties you may not have fully acknowledged. Sasha immediately interrupted, her tone softening as she tried to process his words. Insecurities, she murmured. Apollo caught the word but continued. Or it could signify an external force you feel is controlling or influencing your life. Maybe authority figures, responsibilities, or fears about the future. Sasha suddenly straightened up, her initial intrigue fading. I don't think that applies to me, she said curtly. I've read stuff like that online before. A palpable tension lingered after Apollo's interpretation. Later, while talking to Kayla, Sasha reiterated her confusion about the insecurity comment, questioning its connection to the giant dream. She criticized Apollo's articulate speech, calling him uppity and, in her distinct Mississippi accent, declaring, I didn't like Buddy vibe. Kayla largely dismissed Sasha's complaints, pointing out the accuracy of Apollo's interpretation. Sasha conceded that point but retorted, anybody could read that on the internet. Perplexed, she then expressed resentment toward Kayla's new friends, warning, I'm going to be paying attention to these new people you have around you. Logical fallacies and the Jolly Green Giant. 1. Dismissing counterarguments. Example. Sasha says, I don't think that applies to me. Explanation. Instead of engaging with Apollo's analysis, Sasha dismisses it outright without providing a valid counterargument. 2. Ad hominem. Example. Sasha later tells Kayla she doesn't like Apollo's vibe and that he's too full of himself. Explanation. Rather than addressing his actual points, she attacks his personality to discredit him. 3. Appeal to ignorance. Example. Sasha says, I Googled it. Everything he said, I've seen it before. Explanation. She dismisses Apollo's interpretation by asserting it added nothing new, avoiding engagement with his specific reasoning. 4. Strawman fallacy. Example. Sasha reacts strongly to Apollo mentioning insecurities in her dream interpretation. Explanation. Apollo suggested it as one possible meaning, but Sasha took it as a personal attack rather than an analysis of subconscious symbolism. Kayla was no stranger to conflict, but navigating friendships, intellect, and egos on Bigo Live was an entirely new challenge. Nike was gone, but new tensions were rising. Sasha didn't trust Apollo. Apollo didn't trust Sasha. And Kayla? She was caught in the middle. Could she mend the divide? Or was this just another lesson that some people don't want solutions? They just want to be right? Stay tuned for the next chapter of Love and Fallacies. When bonds break, the aftermath can be both painful and enlightening. This chapter illustrates how confrontations can serve as catalysts for self-reflection, urging us to evaluate our boundaries and the company we keep. Chapter 5. The Crying Man. Kayla was at the doctor's office with her grandfather when Sasha called. Sasha told her that Marcus had called, asking if Kayla had a new man, and added, he wants you back, though. You need to get back with your old man. Kayla was immediately suspicious. Why would Marcus be calling Sasha, knowing full well he'd be livid if she reached out to his friends? And why was Sasha so comfortable relaying this information, almost pushing the idea that Kayla should take him back, especially after everything that had happened? It had been a while since Kayla had spoken to Marcus, so she couldn't understand where this was coming from. Are you serious? Kayla responded, frustration bubbling. What did I tell you? I told you everything. Sasha shot back, well, you should have answered my text when I asked you what you wanted me to tell him. A wave of betrayal washed over Kayla. It was just like the times she tried to explain logical fallacies to Sasha. It was as if it went in one ear and right out the other. And now, this situation confirmed it. Sasha didn't care about Kayla's feelings, nor did she seem to grasp basic logic. She knew the Bigo unwritten rules. Occupying the number one box often signaled a connection, a relationship, or some level of exclusivity. Apollo's consistent presence in her number one box wasn't an accident. It was intentional, a subtle way of claiming her space. And she didn't mind. She didn't care. But now Marcus was suddenly asking questions. How did he even know? The only logical explanation was that they had been watching her, spying on her streams, lurking under anonymous profiles. Given Apollo's frequent appearances on her panel and vice versa, it wasn't far-fetched. They were watching. They had to be. The conversation with Sasha ended abruptly, leaving Kayla feeling unsettled. That evening, during Apollo's live session, Kayla was tuned in when he posed a question to the panel. Would you rather be with a man who cries a lot or a man who doesn't cry at all? Miss New York joined the panel, followed shortly by Sasha. Apollo, in the middle of asking Miss New York the question, paused to include Sasha as well. Both agreed to participate, and Apollo posed the question again. Miss New York frowned. I need more context. Sasha didn't hesitate. I would prefer a man who cries because at least he has emotions. Sensing the tension creeping in, Kayla interjected. Hey ladies, it's not that serious. It's just a fun question. Miss New York scoffed. It is serious. Sasha doubled down. Oh, he just wants us to answer the way he wants it to be answered. Apollo remained calm. Crying isn't the only way to express emotions. A man can have deep feelings without shedding tears. The conversation grew chaotic. Participants began talking over one another, making effective dialogue impossible. Realizing the discussion was becoming unproductive, Apollo ended the live stream, putting it in resting mode, where the panel remains open, but the host is no longer actively streaming. Amidst the awkward silence, Kayla simply said, Well, I guess that's it, and left the panel, feeling frustrated that a simple question had spiraled into unnecessary conflict. That night, Kayla hosted her own live session, joined by her new friends, Apollo in Box 1 and Napoki in Box 2. The conversation flowed smoothly, philosophy, personal growth, and casual banter. Then Sasha joined the panel. She wasn't alone. Adrian and his girlfriend Monica entered quietly. Their presence shifted the energy. It was subtle, but Kayla felt it. The conversation dimmed. Apollo and Napoki attempted to include them, throwing out conversation starters, but the responses were minimal. Then came the disruption. Adrian inserted himself into a conversation between Apollo and a participant named Bishop. Unaware of past tensions between the two, Adrian's tone was instantly combative. Kayla, sensing where this was headed, tried to de-escalate. It's nothing, Adrian, she said lightly. Just a prior situation that's been resolved. But Adrian wasn't hearing it. He seemed poised for confrontation, feeding off an invisible tension only he could feel. Eventually, the energy shifted back to normal. One by one, people left the stream, and the session ended on a quiet note. Afterward, Kayla checked her messages. There it was, a text from Bishop. Have fun with your deadbeat. A simple string of words, but heavy, like a warning, a prelude to something bigger, a contradiction before the argument had even begun. Kayla didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a tangled web of fallacies, misplaced loyalties, and recycled disputes that refused to die. Some messages weren't just words. They were omens. Logical fallacies in the crying man. 1. False equivalence. Example. Sasha suggesting that if Kayla had answered her, she wouldn't have told Marcus anything. Explanation. This assumes that responding would have prevented Sasha's actions, which isn't necessarily true. 2. Circular reasoning. Example. Sasha insisting Kayla should take Marcus back because he wants her back. Explanation. The argument assumes its conclusion. Just because he wants her back doesn't mean she should return. 3. False dichotomy. Example. Apollo's question. Would you rather be with a man who cries a lot or a man who doesn't cry at all? Explanation. This presents only two extremes while ignoring the possibility of a balanced emotional man. 4. Strawman argument. Example. Sasha's response. I would prefer a man who cries because at least he has emotions. Explanation. This falsely implies that men who don't cry have no emotions, misrepresenting the alternative position. 5. Red herring. Example. Miss New York changing the focus to it is serious instead of engaging with the question. Explanation. This distracts from the actual discussion. 6. To quoque appeal to hypocrisy. Example, Sasha's retort, "Oh, he just wants us to answer the way he wants it to be answered." Explanation, instead of addressing Apollo's point, she attacks his intent. 7. Poisoning the well. Example, Bishop's message, "Have fun with your deadbeat." Explanation, this undermines Kayla's association with Apollo rather than engaging in a logical discussion. In the wake of conflict, silence can be deafening. Kayla knew that words had weight, that loyalty could be conditional, that sometimes people argued not to be heard, but simply to win. The tension from the panel lingered, stretching beyond the stream into unseen messages and quiet digital battles. What seemed like a casual debate had exposed something deeper, an unspoken war of alliances, power plays, and bruised egos. And yet, for all the chaos, Kayla understood something critical. Some people didn't care about logic. They just wanted control. But control was an illusion, and Kayla was done being a pawn. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Love and Fallacies, where the debates never end, the logic is questionable, and someone is always about to get called out. Chapter 6, my buddy. The next morning, Kayla received a 6 a.m. call from Sasha. While the early hour wasn't unusual due to the time difference, Kayla was still frustrated by Sasha's recent behavior. She waited until she woke up later and saw Sasha's text urging her to call. The conversation began strangely, with Sasha abruptly wanting to discuss music. "Oh, are we still going to do this music thing? Write some songs together," she asked. Taken aback, Kayla agreed, wondering at the timing. Then Sasha casually mentioned, "You know, Buddy unfollowed me." Kayla giggled. "Who? Apollo?" Sasha confirmed it was him, adding, "But I don't care. It's just the app. That's how people are." Kayla didn't believe her. She could sense there was something more behind the comment, but instead of pressing the issue, she let it go. Feeling uneasy, Kayla ended the call. Later that morning, she noticed a text from Adrian sent earlier that day. "I hope all is well. Something seems off with you, sis." This message annoyed her. Adrian hadn't checked on her since her brother attacked her, and they hadn't had a real conversation since her breakup with Marcus. A few hours later, Sasha texted Kayla again. "I'm leaving the family. It just isn't the same," Sasha said. Kayla responded simply, "Yeah, it isn't the same," and left it at that. She didn't elaborate, but she knew that their meanings of "it isn't the same" were completely different. For Kayla, it was true that the family had changed. Neither she nor Sasha was hosting anymore, and many of the original family members weren't active. Things were different, but she also had a strong feeling that's not what Sasha was really referring to. Sasha didn't like her new friends. And now, looking back, Kayla felt like this was what Sasha had wanted to tell her all along, from the very first call that morning. The music talk, the comment about Apollo unfollowing her, it was all a build-up to this moment. Sasha had been waiting for the right time to say it. Kayla suspected that was the real issue, but she wasn't going to entertain the conversation. So the texting ended there. Immediately after, Kayla received notifications that 2 family members had left. One of them was Adrian. Confused and caught off guard, Kayla thought to herself, "I didn't even know Adrian had an issue with being in the family." She assumed his departure had something to do with Sasha. Frustra reflected, nobody wants to have a real conversation about what it really is and how they really feel. They just leave. Before Sasha and Adrian left the family, Love had already told her what they had been saying. They thought Apollo and Kayla were together just because Apollo sat in her #1 box. It had been clear to Kayla for a while that people watched from the outside and made assumptions, but hearing it from Love only confirmed what she already knew. People didn't ask questions, they just assumed. Feeling hurt by the situation, Kayla decided she had no other choice. If people were choosing to pick on her and avoid honest communication, it wasn't worth holding on. She made the difficult decision to block both Sasha and Adrian to protect her peace. 5 minutes after blocking Adrian, she received a text from his girlfriend's phone. "Apollo really got your mind gone. SMH. He really got you gone." This message ignited Kayla's anger. She immediately identified the logical fallacy Adrian was committing, poisoning the well. By suggesting Apollo had gotten to her, Adrian was preemptively discrediting anything she might say or do, framing her as being manipulated and incapable of independent thought. Kayla responded with a final text. "You're committing a logical fallacy called poisoning the well." She left it at that. She didn't explain what it meant. She didn't owe him that much. Later that day, Love, one of the former family members, resumed live streaming. After hearing watered down stories from Sasha and Adrian, Love visited Kayla. When Kayla explained the truth, Love was surprised by the layers of miscommunication. Love asked Sasha and Adrian if they had called Kayla before leaving the family. Sasha admitted to calling but dismissed it as insignificant. Adrian, however, denied having any issues and provided no real explanation for his departure. Then Adrian brought up the text Kayla had sent him. She sent me something about a logical fallacy, he told Love. Love, already knowing the situation, explained to him what a logical fallacy was and how he had committed one in his text message to Kayla. But she wasn't convinced he understood. Logical fallacies in my buddy. 1. Poisoning the well. Example, Adrian's text stating, Apollo really got your mind gone. SMH, he really got you gone. Explanation, Adrian frames Kayla as being manipulated before she can even respond, making anything she says seem invalid. 2. False cause. Example, Sasha and Adrian assuming Kayla and Apollo were together because he sat in her number 1 box. Explanation, they assumed a direct correlation between the seating arrangement and a romantic relationship without any actual proof. 3. Hasty generalization. Example, Sasha's comment, but I don't care, it's just the app, that's how people are. Explanation, she dismissed Apollo's unfollowing as typical behavior of app users without sufficient evidence to support the claim. 4. Red herring. Example, Sasha's initial call focusing on music before revealing she was leaving the family. Explanation, she avoided directly addressing her real feelings until later, making the conversation misleading. In the world of unspoken expectations and quiet betrayals, assumptions reign supreme. Kayla had seen it happen before, people observing from a distance, drawing conclusions, filling in gaps with their own insecurities. But the truth was simple. They never asked. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Love and Fallacies, where misunderstandings grow deeper, trust is tested, and the only certainty is somebody's about to get called out. How many friendships crumble over what was never said? Kayla had been in the same spaces, had spoken the same words, but people only saw what they wanted to see. It's a lesson for all of us. Sometimes people don't actually want the truth. They want confirmation of what they've already decided. And in those moments, silence speaks louder than explanations ever could. When someone wants to misunderstand you, no amount of clarity will change their mind. Chapter 7. Eros. In the weeks following Sasha's fallout with Kayla and the tensions within her family, Kayla found unexpected solace in Apollo. He had become a familiar presence in her life, always available, always listening. Their conversations on the app grew deeper, stretching into the late hours of the night. They spoke about everything, art, philosophy, spirituality, and even their personal traumas. It was a connection that felt profound, an emotional closeness that neither of them had explicitly defined but was undeniable to those who observed. People on the app began to notice their growing bond. Kayla and Apollo were frequently seen together on panels, exchanging inside jokes, finishing each other's thoughts. The chemistry between them was obvious, even if unspoken. It didn't take long for rumors to circulate, whispers that confirmed what Sasha had once suspected. Whether Kayla admitted it or not, Apollo was becoming an important figure in her life. But alongside this deepening connection, subtle red flags began to emerge. Beyond the public panels and group discussions, Kayla and Apollo had carved out their own little world in private chats on Bigo Live. It was their sanctuary, an escape from the noise where they could exist in a space only they understood. In those conversations, everything felt heightened, romanticized. They built stories, imagined alternate realities where they were unbothered by outside opinions. It was a bubble of intimacy created by words alone. Apollo, always the poet, compared their situation to Eros and Psyche. You know the myth, right? He had said one night. Eros fell for Psyche, but he had to keep his identity hidden. She loved him without ever seeing his face. Kayla had laughed. So what does that make me? The Psyche to my Eros, he mused. You don't even care what I look like, just like she didn't. That's rare. And he was right. She didn't care. For weeks, Apollo had never shown his face, yet it didn't bother her. What they had built in conversation felt more real than anything visual. In their private world, the physical didn't matter. At least, that's what she thought at the time. The first red flags. Apollo's possessiveness surfaced in small, seemingly harmless ways at first. He started questioning Kayla's presence on certain panels, particularly Napoki's, the very panel where they had first met. At first, Kayla brushed off his concerns, assuming he was just protective, maybe even a little jealous in a flattering way. Yet, his discontent didn't stop there. Apollo had a noticeable problem with her interactions on the app. If she spent too much time on certain panels, he would later bring it up in private, his tone laced with frustration. "Why do you even need to be up there with them?" he asked one night. Kayla frowned, confused. "Because I enjoy the discussions. I've always been on Napoki's panel. It's a space for open conversation." Apollo exhaled sharply. "I don't like it. I don't like seeing it." His words lingered, heavy with unspoken meaning. It wasn't about what anyone else was doing. It was about what he felt, what he wanted. That was the first time Kayla felt the weight of control in his words. He wanted exclusivity, not just of her time, but of her presence, her attention, her energy. She dismissed it then, unwilling to entertain the idea that Apollo might be that kind of person. But as time went on, his behavior became more difficult to ignore. He would message her while she was on panels, questioning why she was engaging certain people. If she took too long to respond, he would flood her inbox with messages until she answered. His protectiveness, once endearing, now felt suffocating. The realization gnawed at her. Apollo wasn't just growing closer, he was trying to close her in. And for the first time, Kayla wondered if their connection was as safe as she had once believed. Logical fallacies and eros. 1. False equivalence, Apollo. Example, comparing their situation to Eros and Psyche. Explanation. Apollo romanticizes his choice to conceal his identity, implying that because Psyche loved Eros without seeing his face, Kayla should be content with not seeing his either, even though their circumstances are entirely different. 2. Appeal to emotion, Apollo. Example. You don't even care what I look like, just like she didn't. That's rare. Explanation. Apollo frames Kayla's acceptance as something uniquely special to manipulate her into feeling that their bond is more profound than it may actually be. 3. Red herring, Apollo. Example. Why do you even need to be up there with them? Explanation. Instead of addressing his own insecurity, Apollo redirects the conversation to Kayla's actions, making it about her behavior rather than his possessiveness. 4. Guilt tripping, Apollo. Example. I don't like it. I don't like seeing it. Explanation. Apollo makes Kayla feel as though her presence on panels is an issue because it upsets him, subtly making her responsible for his emotions. If this were a different story, Kayla might have called Apollo out right then and there. She might have asked him why he felt the need to control her presence, why he couldn't just let her breathe. But this wasn't a different story. This was her life. And in her life, she had seen these signs one too many times before. Kayla wasn't ignorant, far from it. She had always given people the benefit of the doubt, maybe even a little too much. But that wasn't naivety. That was optimism, with a sprinkle of, let's just see how this plays out. Spoiler alert, it was playing all right, just not in her favor. Find out what happens next time on Love and Fallacies, where the red flags are obvious, but the drama is just too good to walk away from. The allure of deep connections can sometimes blind us to red flags. This chapter emphasizes the importance of balancing emotional intimacy with critical thinking, ensuring that we don't lose ourselves in the process. Chapter 8. The Incident on Napoki's Live Stream. Napoki's live stream that night was titled Dr. Visa the Messiah. It was meant to be a space of discussion centered around Dr. Visa's knowledge and perspectives. But everything changed when Fahima entered with gossip about him and their fallout. Napoki was more than just a host. She was part of Dr. Visa's family, making Fahima's decision to enter the live stream with gossip about him even more questionable. It was an unspoken rule. Talking negatively about Dr. Visa in that space was like stepping into the lion's den. It immediately raised the question, what exactly was Fahima trying to do? Despite this, Napoki wanted to keep the peace. Instead of engaging with the drama, she chose a diplomatic approach. Let me invite Dr. Visa here. While waiting for Dr. Visa to arrive, the panel grew even more tense. One of Napoki's close friends joined the stream, and things escalated instantly. He confronted Fahima outright, calling her a scammer and a con artist. Though he didn't go into detail about what he had witnessed, his disdain for her was obvious. Fahima, unwilling to back down, fired back with insults of her own. Instead of addressing the accusations, she resorted to personal attacks, throwing out claims about his personal life, including allegations of infidelity, accusations she couldn't possibly know to be true. The argument turned into a back and forth of baseless insults, yet neither of them actually stated what the real issue was. It became clear that Fahima might have felt attacked, but she had also thrown the first stone. And when the same energy was returned to her, she refused to take accountability. She played the victim instead, insisting that she wanted no parts in forgiving Dr. Visa. She was adamant that she would never forgive what he had said about her. The arrival of Dr. Visa, everything goes left. When Dr. Visa finally arrived, the entire panel exploded. Kayla, a supporter of Dr. Visa, had already been aware of Fahima's behavior. She had seen how Fahima carried herself on her own live streams and wasn't particularly impressed. The issue wasn't just about Fahima's gossiping, her entire demeanor was condescending. She often spoke about being high class while labeling others as low class. She claimed to teach people how to be high class, talking down to others as if they were beneath her. Given her position as a respected Muslim woman, Kayla found her behavior off-putting and contradictory. Because of this, Kayla had a bias. She could admit that. But she also knew that if she didn't genuinely feel Fahima was out of line, she wouldn't have spoken up at all. The way Fahima came into Napoki's space with drama, escalated an argument, and then refused accountability only confirmed everything Kayla had already observed. So, when Napoki revoked Fahima's immunity, her admin privileges in the room, Kayla saw an opening. The moment the argument became too heated, she kicked Fahima out. What happened next was immediate. Not even a minute later, Kayla received a private message, a single hateful word, nigger. It was an instant retaliation, but Kayla ignored it at first. Then, an hour later, she received a second message identical to the first, but this time from a different fake account, Fufu account. It was clear that someone had intentionally created anonymous accounts to send these messages. Whether it was Fahima herself, one of her supporters, or a separate troll, the timing was too suspicious to ignore. Kayla decided to send Napoki a screenshot of the message with a simple comment. Look, right after I kicked her, LOL. What followed was an even bigger storm than anyone expected. The aftermath, the blame game begins. When Napoki mentioned the messages out loud on her panel, Kayla confirmed what had happened. She didn't directly accuse Fahima, but she pointed out the obvious possibilities. It could have been Fahima on a Fufu account. It could have been one of her supporters acting on her behalf. She left room for doubt, making it clear that she wasn't outright blaming Fahima. Yet somehow, by the next day, the entire situation had been twisted. Enter Lady Divine, the court of public opinion. Another streamer, Lady Divine, became the center of the drama. Lady Divine was the type of person people ran to with their issues, as if she were some kind of mother figure presiding over internet conflicts, and Fahima made sure to take full advantage of that. On Lady Divine's livestream, Fahima put on a full performance, tears, victimhood, and an audience that ate it up. She painted herself as a target, a victim of an elaborate plot, claiming that there was a snake soup brewing against her, whatever that meant. She was being set up to go against Dr. Visa. There were secret cliques, bought and paid off people, and a conspiracy against her. And Lady Divine's panel believed every word, even though none of them had actually been there. Without even questioning the sequence of events, they blamed Kayla and Napoki, insisting that Kayla was feeding Napoki false information. Everyone except Fahima was at fault. Yet the real issue was never addressed. The fact that Fahima had started the entire thing by bringing gossip into Napoki's livestream in the first place. No accountability, no reflection, just deflection. And the drama only continued from there. Logical fallacies in the Napoki livestream incident. 1. Ad hominem, personal attack. Fahima and Napoki's friend, instead of addressing the real issue, they resorted to personal insults. Example: Napoki's friend calling Fahima a scammer and con artist without explaining why. Example: Fahima retaliating with claims about infidelity instead of refuting the scam accusations. Why it's a fallacy. Attacking the person instead of addressing the argument avoids real discussion and relies on character smears. Do to quote you too. Fahima. When confronted, she didn't defend her actions, but instead pointed fingers at others. Example: instead of defending herself from the scam allegations, she accused Napoki's friend of cheating on his wife. Why it's a fallacy? Just because someone else may have done something bad doesn't mean your actions are justified. 3. Strawman argument. Lady Divine's panel. They misrepresented what actually happened to make Fahima seem like a bigger victim. Example: Kayla never outright blamed Fahima for the slurs, yet the story became Kayla accused Fahima of sending the messages. Why it's a fallacy? The argument is twisted into a weaker, inaccurate version, making it easier to attack. 4. False dilemma, black and white thinking. Fahima's narrative on Lady Divine's panel, she framed everything as an us versus them situation. Example: everyone is against me. There's a conspiracy, and people are bought and paid off. Reality: there were multiple perspectives, but she only allowed 2. I'm the victim, or you're against me. Why it's a fallacy? It ignores nuance, forcing people to choose a side instead of considering multiple factors. 5. Argument from ignorance, appeal to lack of evidence. Fahima's supporters. They had no actual proof that Fahima was being set up, but believed it anyway. Example: they had snake soup for me, implying a setup with zero evidence. Why it's a fallacy? Just because something hasn't been disproven doesn't mean it's true. 6. Appeal to emotion. Fahima on Lady Divine's panel. She used tears and dramatic storytelling instead of facts. Example: crying and playing victim to distract from the fact that she started the drama. Why it's a fallacy? Emotional manipulation doesn't prove anything. It just makes people feel bad for you. 7. Circular reasoning. Fahima's claims of a setup. Her argument relied on itself being true. Example: people are setting me up because they're against me. But why are they against you? Because they're setting me up. Why it's a fallacy? The argument goes in a circle instead of proving anything. 8. False equivalence. Fahima feeling attacked. She equated being called a scammer with receiving racial slurs, 2 very different things. Why it's a fallacy? Just because 2 things seem similar on the surface doesn't mean they are equal in severity. 9. No true Scotsman, deflecting criticism. Fahima and her self-image. She saw herself as a high-class, respected Muslim woman, but didn't act accordingly. Example: when her behavior was criticized, she still claimed to be above the people calling her out. Why it's a fallacy? Instead of admitting flaws, people move the goalposts to maintain their self-image. At the end of the day, accountability was avoided by redirecting blame and creating a false victim narrative. And so the live stream drama came full circle. What began as a casual discussion on Napoki's panel spiraled into a full-blown controversy, fueled by gossip, unchecked emotions, and a refusal to take accountability. Fahima walked into the space with an agenda, knowingly stirring the pot in a room that was not designed for her complaints. When confronted, she deflected, accused, and played the victim, twisting the narrative into a grand conspiracy against her. Kayla, caught in the crossfire of someone else's mess, made a decisive move. She removed the problem, but in doing so, she unknowingly became the next target, falsely accused of spreading lies while the real instigator escaped responsibility. And in the end, the people who weren't even there became the loudest voices, rewriting history in real time. So what did we learn from all this? 1. Gossip is a dangerous game. It doesn't matter how small the gossip seems. Bringing messy business into a space where it doesn't belong will always lead to chaos. 2. Accountability is rare but necessary. When confronted with their own bad behavior, some people will double down instead of owning up. But without accountability, the cycle repeats itself. 3. The loudest person isn't always the right one. Just because someone cries the loudest doesn't mean they're the victim. Sometimes the real villain plays the best victim role. 4. Fake narratives spread faster than the truth. The real story got lost overnight. Misinformation, twisted facts, and outright lies turned a simple event into a full-blown spectacle. What can we do better? Stop taking gossip at face value. Before reacting, ask, who is talking? Why now? What do they gain? Recognize emotional manipulation. Just because someone is crying or yelling doesn't mean they're telling the truth. Think before you react. Misinformation spreads because people run with the first version of a story they hear. At the end of the day, this wasn't just drama on a live stream. It was a masterclass in how narratives are shaped, how people shift blame, and how easy it is to rewrite history when emotions get in the way of facts. But now, with clear eyes and a full picture, the question remains. Next time, will we see through the deception, or will we let history repeat itself? Chapter 9, The Creation of Diamond Kufilan. The Birth of the Bigodocuseries. Kayla's YouTube channel, the Bigodocuseries, began as a simple project, a way to document the wild, unpredictable interactions she encountered on the Bigo app. The idea first took root after the incident with Nike, known for her fiery outburst. Nike had gone on multiple live stream rants, calling Kayla out over the petty Baconator comment. Rather than responding with anger, Kayla did what she did best. She turned the situation into art. She created Baconator, a playful diss track meant to poke fun at the situation while entertaining her audience. It wasn't about being cruel, it was about reflecting the reality of what had happened, Bigodocuseries style. The song grabbed people's attention, but more importantly, it sparked an idea. What if Kayla used her creativity to document Bigo culture, not just the drama, but the personalities, behaviors, and underlying psychology of how people operated on the app? Her channel quickly evolved into something bigger. Kayla did what she always did, turned life into a song. The track was called Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, a direct reflection of the behavior she had witnessed firsthand. And the response? People loved it, not because it was a diss track, but because it captured something real about how people interacted and operated on the app. That had always been Kayla's true intent, not to get back at anyone, but to document Bigo culture in an honest way. She didn't want to be known for just making those kinds of songs. She didn't want her artistry to revolve around exposing people. That's when she thought of higher purpose, the shift toward positivity, creating Diamond Kufilan. After all the negativity, Kayla knew she needed to shift her energy. She didn't want to just call out problematic behaviors. She wanted to celebrate the people who uplifted, inspired, and brought wisdom to the platform. She already knew higher purpose, a figure on Bigo who spoke in cryptic messages, spiritual insight, and self-proclaimed status as Super Diamond. People listened to her when she spoke. She had a presence that was hard to ignore. One night, Kayla had a realization. Instead of just making songs about what's wrong with people, why not make something uplifting? Something that highlighted the good instead of focusing on the chaos. That's when the idea for Diamond Kufilan was born. She decided to create something special, a Somali-inspired musical tribute paired with AI-generated visuals, designed to reflect the unique presence that higher purpose brought to the platform. Kayla brought the idea to Apollo, knowing that he had known higher purpose longer than she had and could contribute valuable insights. She thought he could most definitely help with the one-liners. As they brainstormed names, Kayla considered using the Arabic word for diamond, almaz, but it felt too plain. Apollo suggested Diamond Kufilan, with Kufilan meaning adequate or sufficient in Somali. Kayla approved, appreciating the depth and cultural nuance the name added. Reasoning skills in the creation of Diamond Kufilan. There were no major logical fallacies in this process. Kayla's journey to Diamond Kufilan wasn't just about music. It was about critical thinking, self-awareness, and decision-making. Here's what it revealed about how people reason through decisions. 1. Recognizing the difference between documentation and drama. Kayla never set out to make diss tracks, but audience reactions can shape perception, making something seem like a diss even when it isn't. Lesson: the way people perceive your intent isn't always the reality. 2. The influence of public opinion. People loved Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, but that didn't mean Kayla wanted to keep making those kinds of songs. When you create something people like, it's easy to feel trapped into giving them more of the same. Lesson: a creator has to decide, do I follow demand or do I create what feels true to me? 3. Shifting perspectives requires intentional thought. Choosing to focus on positive energy instead of negativity isn't automatic. it's a decision. Kayla recognized that she didn't want her art to be defined by negativity, so she actively made a shift. Lesson: growth in reasoning means asking yourself not just, what do I want to do, but why am I doing it? 4. Understanding the role of context in interpretation. Even though Kayla's song was a tribute, if it had been released in a different environment, some people still might have twisted the meaning. How people receive information depends on the climate of the space it's presented in. Lesson: what you say matters, but where, when, and how you say it can shape the entire outcome. Sometimes the best ideas come from knowing what you don't want to create. Kayla didn't want to be known for tearing people down. She wanted to build something that could stand on its own. Diamond Kufilon wasn't just a song. It was a statement, a reminder that not everything on Bigo had to be about drama and conflict. And at least for a moment, it felt like the energy was shifting. Reasoning isn't just about making decisions. It's about understanding why you made them. Know your why. It changes everything. Chapter 10: The Illusion of Truth. Apollo's role in the project and friendship tensions. Apollo had been eager to work with Kayla for a long time, not just on this project, but on anything. He had even suggested starting a business together. Kayla, however, had always been hesitant, not because she wanted to judge him, but because she knew better. There had been past situations that left her feeling uneasy, but she had still given him the benefit of the doubt. She wanted to trust that this time would be different. Apollo had a habit. He wouldn't directly tell her not to do something, but he made it clear when he didn't like it. He would become annoyed, and that frustration would almost always lead to guilt-tripping and manipulative behavior. It was as if Kayla was supposed to respond by changing her actions just because he made his feelings known. And he made them known all the time. She had learned to navigate around it, but deep down, she always had a feeling that something about their dynamic wasn't right. Still, she had agreed to work with him, and it didn't turn out the way she had hoped. The public blow-up, the higher purpose incident. The public fallout didn't just come from nowhere. It started when they presented the song to Higher Purpose. Apollo and Kayla were on the phone before the reveal, and something in his tone felt off. Then Apollo casually mentioned, I got in contact with Higher Purpose. She's watching it now. Kayla was confused. Why wouldn't he tell her to wait? Why wouldn't he say, hold on, let me get Kayla, I got a surprise for you, before giving Higher Purpose the link? By the time Kayla made it to Higher Purpose's panel, she disconnected the call with Apollo and hopped on the panel. As soon as she joined, Apollo said, here's my co-creator now. Something felt off, but Kayla let it go, waiting for the song to finish. Higher Purpose was grateful, thanking them both. And as soon as the moment felt right, Kayla spoke. I came up with this idea to make this for you. She didn't even get to fully explain her creative. Apollo cut in immediately. It's my idea too. Kayla felt uneasy. She didn't make a scene. She let it slide, for now. Kayla's approach, a calm question, turns into frustration. Kayla did not want to cause a scene or make Apollo feel attacked. She knew that they had been in a good creative space since making the song, and the last thing she wanted was to ruin that. But it was bothering her. So she waited. She gave it time. She made sure it wasn't just emotion talking. Then, later that night, she approached Apollo calmly. Can I ask you something? I don't want you to feel attacked, and I really don't want to start a fight. Apollo agreed. Kayla took a deep breath. Why did you say that was your idea too? Apollo didn't hesitate. Because it was my idea too. Kayla was stunned. You didn't care about this. This is my Docuseries channel, and I agreed to work with you. Now you're saying it was your idea. Apollo kept repeating, it was my idea too. I was on the phone with you. Kayla shook her head. Yes, you contributed. Yes, you made changes, but this was not your idea. Are you serious? Apollo doubled down. Well, I was brainstorming too. Kayla sighed. That's not the point. You would have never done this for her on your own. At least not today. This was not your idea today. At that moment it hit her, and she was tired. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of having to explain herself. Tired of the people taking credit for her work. After everything she had been through, this was the final straw. She told Apollo she didn't want to talk to him anymore. She didn't want to be his friend. Instead of respecting that, Apollo took it public. The public fallout. Apollo shows his ass. The next day, Apollo had a full-blown meltdown on Napoki's panel. He was contradicting himself the entire time. One minute, he was spiraling, calling Kayla evil and saying, how could she not want to work with me? How could she not value me? How could she dishonor me? Then, in the next breath, he would say how much he loved her. The entire rant was conflicting and chaotic. He ranted to anyone who would listen. He knew Kayla hated public embarrassment. He knew what she had just gone through with other people. And he still took it to the internet. That was the moment Kayla knew she was done for good. Logical fallacies in the illusion of truth incident. 1. False equivalence, Apollo. Example, comparing his contributions to Kayla's by saying, it was my idea too. Explanation, Apollo equates his minor contributions to Kayla's original concept, minimizing her role and making it seem like an equal collaboration when it wasn't. 2. Gaslighting, Apollo. Example, you're dishonoring me. Explanation, instead of addressing Kayla's valid frustration, Apollo reframes himself as the victim to make her question her own feelings. 3. Deflection, Apollo. Example, you're turning everything into an argument. Explanation, Apollo shifts the focus away from his own actions, making Kayla the problem instead of taking accountability. 4. Strawman argument, Apollo. Example, Apollo exaggerates Kayla's reaction, saying she was trying to erase him from the project instead of addressing her actual concern. Explanation, he misrepresents Kayla's issue to make himself seem like the victim. 5. Appeal to pity, Apollo. Example, his public meltdown where he framed himself as the one being abandoned. Explanation, instead of reflecting on his actions, he used emotional manipulation to get sympathy from others. 6. Contradictory statements, Apollo. Example, one minute he was attacking Kayla and the next he was talking about how much he loved her. Explanation, his conflicting messages created confusion and made it hard to take him seriously. Some people don't betray you because they hate you. They betray you because they never respected you to begin with. Kayla thought loyalty was a two-way street. Apollo made it a one-way road with him in control. And when she finally saw him for who he really was, there was only one thing left to do. Let him go. Some people respect you only as long as you stay in a role that serves them. The moment you set boundaries, they show you who they really are. Believe them. Conclusion, the outsider's perspective. I never set out to be an expert in human behavior, nor did I ever claim to have all the answers. But one thing has remained true throughout my life. I observe. I analyze. I try to make sense of the patterns, the interactions, the way people communicate, or fail to. From my time on Bigo to my experiences in the real world, one lesson has become abundantly clear. People don't like what they don't understand. I've spent a lifetime being told that if so many people have the same issue with me, then maybe I'm the problem. That I need to adjust, that I need to conform, that I need to be more agreeable, more digestible, more acceptable. But here's the thing, I was never meant to fit in. From a young age, my grandfather saw something in me that most people didn't. He encouraged me to take personality tests, to explore how I process the world. And even though no test, no label, no theory has ever been able to fully explain why I often feel like the outsider, I've learned that I don't need an explanation. I've come to understand that we live in a world where having boundaries is seen as rebellion, where thinking differently is met with resistance, where refusing to play into the expected narrative makes you a villain in someone else's story. It's frustrating, it's isolating, and at times it's exhausting. But if there's one thing I refuse to do, it's shrink myself to make others comfortable. I've been called emotional. I've been called irrational. I've even been called crazy. And I'll admit, for a while, I let those words sink in. I started questioning myself, second guessing, third guessing, fourth guessing, the weight of generalizations. All women are emotional. Men are logical, hung over me like a cloud. I wanted to prove that I wasn't just reacting on emotion, that I wasn't irrational, that I wasn't whatever label people tried to slap on me. That insecurity led me here. It led me to research, to question, to study, and what I found was a deeper understanding, not just of others, but of myself. I don't claim to know everything, but I do claim to be trying to understand. And if there's one thing I hope for, it's that everyone takes a moment to look in the mirror. We throw around words like logic, and reason without ever questioning our own reasoning. We make assumptions about people without ever questioning our own biases. We criticize others for their mistakes without ever questioning our own contradictions. I've watched grown men who pride themselves on being logical, fall into the same emotional traps they accuse others of. I've seen people who preach fairness enable dysfunction just because it's easier than accountability. And I've realized something. This isn't just about social media. This is life. This is human nature. The need for control, the fear of being wrong, the ego that won't let go. I don't hate the people who behave this way. I just see them for what they are. And I see myself for what I am, a person who is still learning, still growing, still trying to make sense of it all. This book isn't a declaration of who's right or wrong. It's not about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about understanding. Because at the end of the day, that's all we really want, to be understood. And if we can't find that in others, we owe it to ourselves to at least try to understand ourselves. So no, I'm not perfect, but perfection was never the goal. Growth is, reflection is, and protecting my peace will always be. This is my truth, my story, my perspective, and maybe, just maybe, it helps someone else make sense of theirs. Peace and love, Kayla aka Coco. Kayla's reasoning skills and how they shape this conclusion. Kayla's approach to understanding people and situations has always been rooted in deep observation and analysis. Over time, she developed a structured way of thinking that allowed her to separate emotion from logic while still validating the importance of emotions in human interaction. Her reasoning skills shape this conclusion in the following ways. 1. Self-reflection. Instead of blindly accepting what others say about her, Kayla takes a step back, assesses her own patterns, and asks herself the tough questions. 2. Pattern recognition. By constantly observing behaviors, conversations, and interactions, she's been able to identify larger societal patterns, not just individual conflicts. 3. Emotional regulation. While emotions are natural, she has learned to process them before responding, ensuring that she doesn't make impulsive decisions based on temporary feelings. 4. Critical thinking. Kayla challenges narratives, including those that she has believed in the past, and remains open to revising her perspectives when presented with new information. 5. Logical consistency. She holds herself accountable to the same reasoning she applies to others, recognizing that if she expects fairness and logic from others, she must apply it to herself as well. These reasoning skills don't make her immune to bias or mistakes, but they give her the tools to recognize when she's falling into faulty thinking. And that's all anyone can really do. Stay aware, stay open, and keep learning. Logical fallacies in Kayla's reflection. 1. Self-serving bias. Example. Kayla acknowledges her flaws but emphasizes her growth more than her mistakes. Explanation. People tend to interpret their actions in a way that favors their personal growth while seeing others' mistakes more clearly. 2. Confirmation bias. Example. Interpreting people's resistance to her as proof that she thinks differently, rather than considering other possible factors. Explanation. We all tend to seek and interpret information that confirms what we already believe. 3. False dilemma. Example. Suggesting that society forces people to either conform or be outcasts, with little room for nuance. Explanation. Sometimes situations have more than just two choices. The middle ground is often ignored. And there you have it, the grand conclusion, the final reflection, the mic drop moment. But wait, did Kayla just commit a few logical fallacies herself? I mean, self-serving bias? Maybe. Confirmation bias? Possibly. False dilemma? Okay, now we're pushing it. But isn't that the point? None of us are above these patterns. We all fall into them. We all let our emotions steer the wheel sometimes. The goal isn't to be perfect. It's to be aware, to catch ourselves in those moments and decide whether we're just reacting or actually thinking. So if you take anything from this book, let it be this. Even the ones who study fallacies fall into them sometimes. Even the most self-aware can be a little blind. And that's okay because learning never ends. The real question is, are you willing to check yourself? Embracing one's uniqueness can be both isolating and empowering. Kayla's reflection encourages readers to honor their individuality, recognizing that true understanding begins within and that personal growth is a continuous journey. About the author. Coley Hawkins. Coley Hawkins is a storyteller, content creator, and cultural observer with a sharp eye for human behavior. Born and raised in Compton, California, she grew up in a city known for its resilience, creativity, and complex social dynamics. Her upbringing instilled in her a deep understanding of community, survival, and the art of reading people, skills that would later shape her unique approach to storytelling. A natural observer, Coley has always been drawn to the way people interact, challenge, and contradict themselves. Her experiences navigating online communities, including the world of Bigo Live, inspired her to document the logic, or lack thereof, behind everyday conversations and conflicts. Love and Fallacies is more than just a book. It's a deep dive into human reasoning, emotional manipulation, and the subtle ways people twist reality to suit their narratives. Beyond her writing, Coley is an advocate for critical thinking, self awareness, and the power of owning one's truth. She believes that understanding how people think is just as important as what they think. Through her work, she hopes to inspire readers to recognize the patterns, fallacies, and contradictions in their own lives, leading to sharper minds and stronger boundaries. With roots in California's rich cultural and intellectual landscape, Coley brings both street smarts and deep introspection to her storytelling, challenging readers to question the world around them while staying true to themselves. Love and Fallacies by Coley Hawkins. In the digital age, where conversations unfold in real time and relationships play out across live streams, Kayla navigates a world where logic and emotion constantly collide. Love and Fallacies is a gripping exploration of friendships, love, betrayal, and the flawed reasoning that often fuels conflict. After a painful breakup with Marcus, Kayla turns to the online streaming world of Bigo Live, seeking intellectual discourse and authentic connections. But what begins as an escape soon becomes another battleground. From toxic friendships with Nike and Sasha to the tense dynamics of Apollo's logical debates, Kayla finds herself entangled in heated conversations where personal biases and manipulation often overshadow truth. As she unpacks the logical fallacies woven into her interactions, straw man arguments, ad hominem attacks, gaslighting, false dilemmas, she begins to see the patterns of her past repeating. Whether it's a long distance love that lacked empathy, a friend who twisted narratives to avoid accountability, or an online community quick to rewrite history, Kayla must decide. Will she continue playing by these unwritten rules, or will she finally break free from the cycle of deception? Blending real-life drama with sharp intellectual insights, Love and Fallacies is a thought-provoking look at how we communicate, how we misunderstand, and how the need to be right can often destroy the truth. Will Kayla finally master the art of logic in a world driven by emotion? Or will she become just another casualty of online debates and toxic entanglements?